Welcome back to Beautiful Work, Beautiful Life. You are here with two life coaches, two Laurels, and we are talking all things inner life, inner work. And I was thinking today, before we hopped on our call to record here, that between the two Laurels that you're listening to today, we have almost half a century worth of inner work to share. And I thought, Laurel, that's a number, huh?
That is a number. Makes me think that we are the elders.
We are the elders. Laurel and I are just started reading a great book by Sharon Blackie called Hagitude. And I'm feeling like I'm really ready to embody that elder role and help it to shine in the world. How about you?
I'm feeling that too. It's really interesting because since I picked up that book, it's really put a different perspective for me, at least changed my perspective on, kind of the societal norm to resist that aging, especially for women, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to speak, men, I'm sure, go through that as well. But it really has given me just a shift of, wow, I still, at this stage of life,
Mm-hmm.
I have a role, I have a purpose, I have wisdom to share.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's really changed kind of how I've thought about, a lot of my clients. I'm going to say the majority of my clients are young women, under 35. And a few years ago, I was really like, what is that about?
Yeah.
Am I the sage or the crone is what I used to joke. But now I know I don't have to be the sage or the crone. I'm an elder.
Yeah. A wise elder with all
Yes.
the, centuries. Oh, excuse me, decades.
Thank you. Well, I am one who might
work.
I am one who believes that my inner work is lifetimes old, right?
Absolutely.
And so it could be centuries old.
Yeah. Yeah. That's one of those beliefs that might have gotten you burned at the stake back in who knows what century.
No doubt. No doubt.
All right. So today I am super excited to talk about our interview this month with Ericka Lewis. I can't wait to make the announcement that I want to make, but I'm going to wait one more minute before I make it. And that is, I want to talk about what we titled our show today.
Yes.
So we titled our show, the show with Ericka last week was called Heart-Centered Leadership. And we are calling this show Heartfelt Living in a Heady World as kind of a jump off from your discussion with Ericka, because it really was that wonderful example of getting out of your head into your body, into your heart, showing up with vulnerability. So many good things there, huh, Laurel?
Yes. The interview with her was really lovely. I mean, I was going to say unbelievable, but it's not unbelievable knowing Ericka, right? I don't know her well, but knowing her and having that sense of her being able to, tap into her wisdom, her intuition, be in her body and bring it into the external heady world that we live in and that she works in.
Yeah. Yeah. In a male-dominated industry. So,
yes.
Yeah. So that's a big thing for a woman to be doing that, right?
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And so the big announcement is that Ericka is my daughter. And I love that it never came up in the interview. That made me so happy. I was like, she's here as her own person, not because she happens to be my daughter, right? But because she is doing the inner work and creating her own messy, beautiful life, which I love that you two talked about.
Oh, yes.
Loved that. Yeah.
The hot mess that we both are. And, it was really interesting because I too loved that her role as your daughter wasn't part of her beautiful work.
Yeah.
Wasn't part of the interview because it really gave me a chance to be in relationship with her as a guest, as a fellow female in a predominantly male workplace, which I lived for 30 years.
Yeah.
So we share that in common, right? And it was lovely to be in that place and in relationship to her. I hate to say it, without the role that you play in
Yeah.
both of our lives.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. I love that. And I love too because you're able to really stay focused on so many issues that so many women face in the work world, right?
Yes.
And then how to cultivate that lifestyle, which is so challenging, especially for young mothers. I mean, I know Erica, like me, had her own aha moment in the home realizing, oh, I am not showing up or being who I really want to be here. And that became her dedication to her deep work, just like with me, right? And finding her person to work with. And
Yes.
I loved that, that.
Yes. And
Uh,
when I think about that, um, that trajectory, if you will, that
mhm,
oftentimes we have an aha moment in our personal life.
mhm.
And because, at least in my experience and many of my clients, when we're at work, when we're in the workplace, when we're fulfilling our responsibilities and our role that we are being paid for, and we need to be paid for in order to live in this world that we live in.
And being successful.
That's right, right? The reward
Hmm.
system in the workplace is very big.
Yeah.
So we have an aha moment in our personal life, and the work that we do, from that aha moment spills over into the workplace, right? Because
Yeah.
as Ericka explores, what kind of mother do I want to be? How do I want to show up in my home with my family? She can't, none of us can do this. It's not healthy for us. Be one person at home and a different person in the workplace.
Yeah.
That congruity and consistency, and the saying, how we do one thing is how we do everything. you know
Hmm.
and we've talked about this, I think, a couple months ago, hiding parts of yourself. So when you hide parts of yourself in the workplace, it really does create that inner conflict and unrest and
Yeah.
you know unease, which then
Yeah.
is disease. So it's just so beautiful to see Ericka in that place where her aha moment and the work she was doing in her personal life carried over into her career, where
Yeah.
she's highly successful in a
Yeah.
predominantly, male industry,
Yeah.
bringing heart-centered leadership and being I'm going to say, a guide, a mentor, a teacher to others in the workplace.
Yeah, yeah. So interesting. Kind of like thinking about the interview with John Hand, when he said, please commit to being a guide, right? And I almost feel like, when you do the inner work and you really make that commitment to yourself, you generally are doing that whether you're realizing it or not. And I think that's
Yes.
kind of part of Erica's story, is
Yes.
I want to show up and I want to give women and men, permission to show up authentically and in a more vulnerable way, And I think, I was thinking about how it's so easy to, have the success at work and think everything I'm doing here is working, right? And so you don't have to live more heart centered in order to necessarily succeed there. But most of the time, what people find, and what I know I found working with clients, is they get to some point in their life, some of us at 30, some of us at 60, right? But somewhere in between there, usually, where we go, something doesn't feel right here. I I'm not happy. I don't. I'm not fulfilled. I'm not whatever, right? And oftentimes it has to do with that disconnection from our heart space, and what our heart is trying to share with
Yes.
us.
And I'm so glad you brought that up, especially about, it's women and men, right, in the
Yes.
workplace that are feeling more called to heart-centered leadership. And so I coach men as well. And I know there are men who really want to lead with their heart, they follow their intuition, or
Mhm.
they can feel that intuition. They know there's a different way, a different type of leadership, but maybe the organization or the structure or the reward system, doesn't feel safe to be a heart-centered leader as a male.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I'm seeing this happening. The more that women are showing up in this space, we not only have to be a guide for other women, we have to be guides for the men who want to be safe in their heart-centered leadership. And it really is going to take both, all genders, I will say, for us to change that culture of a workplace.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like my husband is such a great example. His work story. I'd love to have him come on. Maybe you'll interview him sometime, Laurel, about this because he when he worked in corporate America, he was very successful at a very early age and had a fast trajectory up the corporate ladder. And he's a very heart-centered guy, right? And so integrating that into his leadership, I know evolved over time for him, but also was still restricted by the corporate cultures that he worked in until he worked in a company that was owned by a husband and wife, and the wife was his boss. And that's when he was able to, I think, grow in a lot of ways and also was allowed to because her leadership was heart centered as well as very, very powerful. And then owning his own business at the end of his life, being able to do his business and run the organization the way that he wanted to, he could really come forth as a very heart centered, intuitive leader that he is.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's
Yeah.
wonderful. And, I can just imagine in a husband wife leadership team, owners of a business, right? That the the woman had the safety. She felt safe in this style of leadership because she felt safe in her relationship with her husband, right? Whereas what often happens is women are in leadership in companies, but they don't have that safety of doing things a different way. Not
Mm.
all of them, I have to
Yeah.
say, right? Like,
Yeah.
thank goodness for the trailblazers who are willing to risk a different style of leadership.
Yeah.
But I know in my experience, oftentimes when you were promoted, you were really expected to toe the line, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and bring the the style of management, top-down management into your group, into the organization, into the team. And
Yeah.
so, that is such a huge piece of how can we create safety for us? How can we train our brains and nervous systems, in a way that we're able to take small risk without, having our nervous system go awry, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, if we go back to Erica's story, right, which is so many stories, and really the first practice in my Live Your Inner Power book and the wheel, right, is listening to your wake up calls. That we get wake up calls. We get these calls that, aha moments where we go, whoa, whoa, wait a minute, something is not right. I'm not right. I cannot keep doing this, right? And
Yeah.
then from there, it's a real journey to figure out what that is, right? And start taking that action and those steps to go inward and figure out how to self correct, self heal, self soothe, self care, all the things. And I loved Erica's story about how she uses her walking as a way to release and process and open and connect and source again from the earth, right? Like this
Yes.
whole, like we always think, oh, we have to add another meditation piece, we have to add this, we have to add that. And it's like, well, you can also incorporate it in what you're already doing.
It's so lovely. I felt the same way about not just her walking, but about her morning ritual of being
Mm,
out at sunrise, taking care of her chickens, right?
yeah,
Having her coffee or whatever she's choosing to drink. I've
yeah,
forgotten, but that it was so freeing, if you will,
yeah,
to hear for me, and I hope our listeners feel this way too, that our meditative practices, our spiritual practices don't have to be, a long hour-long meditation in silence with our eyes closed. It
right.
doesn't have to, it can be whatever is working for you, right?
Yeah,
So Erica, her walking and then her feeding the chickens. I mean,
yeah.
those are beautiful spiritual practices.
I know. I think we forget sometimes that these kind of mundane daily acts of service are spiritual work, right? When we do them with love and intention and gratitude and inner, connection, it is spiritual practice. It's not
Yes,
just a daily task that I have to do over and
that's
over.
right.
Yeah.
I just had a conversation with a client the other day who we were talking about her evening routine, which she feels really good about. And she was explaining to me she showers in the evening before bed as part of, you know, releasing, washing away the energy of the day,
Yeah.
the burdens of the day, the unresolved conflicts of the day, and using that water, right? And it's we really got into this conversation about when you know that something, a mundane task, we all shower, right? A
Mhm.
mundane task that you can bring into this spiritual practice because it's good for your soul. You know, no different than Erica's feeding the chickens and going for a
Right.
walk. And so, I want to encourage our listeners to think about those mundane things. It
Yeah.
also reminds me of the, you know, a friend of mine went to a Buddhist temple as a silent retreat. And it
Mm.
wasn't a typical retreat like maybe at Kripalu. It was a retreat where she lived as one of, the house help
Mm.
in the Buddhist lifestyle for 5 days in silence. And the chore of washing the dishes is meditative, right? The sweeping the floor is meditative. And so, how can we bring that meditative, spiritual energy, maybe,
Right.
to our mundane practices? And that ties into the heart based leadership that
And,
Ericka is living.
and heartfelt living that we're talking about here is,
Yeah.
I think that if we can get out of our head, right, where so much confusion, so much overthinking, over processing, spinning, anxiety gets produced and sort of self produces more, right?
Yes.
Is the actual work of learning how to relax into uh, getting a true connection internally from the neck down, right? So we know we're connected with our heads. Most of us are walking around with our heads on a stick, right? Where we're just like everything's in the head, and we're just operating that way. And so the literal practice of heartfelt living is you have to get connected consciously with your attention and intention to experience what it feels like to be living from heart space, right? And from
Yes.
your full body.
Yes.
Don't
And
stop at heart space.
right,
Going
right.
down
That's
all the way
right.
to the feet. Yeah.
Right. And I mean, it is so important to think about that the world we live in, this Western world, you know,
Mm.
we we're rewarded for our cognitive abilities. We are trained from a very young age to, how many times did you hear as a child, use your head, right? Like, and so we have been trained to do that. So we have a lot of unlearning to do to be able to get into our body. And when we are in our head, oftentimes the only time we're paying attention to our body is when it's sending us strong signals in the form of pain,
Right.
right?
Right.
Right. So how can you, before we get to that point where our body is screaming for attention, we can really begin to ask our body and tap into that body wisdom.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be more and more important. I think it's actually critical for the survival of our species at this point because we have this whole network now of misinformation, of AI, of not knowing what to trust and what kind of information we should be taking in. And we're susceptible because we think we're smart and we think we're in control of our mind when our mind is taking in a whole bunch of information that really isn't being consciously chosen. We actually make ourselves susceptible to more misinformation, the reality of being, misled by people that are very persuasive, and we're in trouble. I mean, the reality, we're really in trouble. And so
Yeah.
the way that we counteract that, right, is our body knows what the truth is. Our body knows what our deep belief and values are, right? And it will register what makes sense, what feels right, what feels true, where our head can't necessarily register it at that strong, deep, truthful level.
Yes. And I think part of that problem is the overconsumption of information,
Yeah.
right? If you think about how we care for our bodies, we try not to overconsume,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and because it makes our body feel slow and sluggish, and so I like to think about the overconsumption of information, even if it's even if it's true factual information and we're not being misled, right? Maybe
Yeah.
it's still overconsuming information can make our minds slow and sluggish,
Yeah.
not clear. We don't have the clarity or the energy to be able to function well. So,
Yeah. And we're not using all our
yeah,
faculties. I mean, I think that's the
right.
other thing, right? I would say, are you using, when people say, are you using all your faculties? Most of the time we're thinking, are you using your whole mind, right?
That's right. That's right.
Versus when I'm talking all your faculties, it's your intuition, your heart, the literal vibrations and nervous system of your body that knows when it's safe and when it's not, right? Are you using all of it to your best of your ability?
Yes. And oh my goodness, that is so good because those, when you think your heart and your intuition, right, your spidey sense, your sixth sense, whatever you might call it, um, I think about those as internal sensory organs, right? Senses, where we also have the gift of our five senses, being our sight, sight, sound, taste, smell, and touch, right? And how often are we in our head, are navigating the world through our head? We rely on our eyes and maybe our ears and our voice, but how often are we losing sight? That no pun intended there, right? But are we underutilizing our sense of touch and smell and taste
Yeah.
in order to give us some, I don't know, evidence, some intelligence, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah, and I want to come back to Erica's mantras. Right,
oh
she had a
yes,
couple that were really powerful, and I wanted to speak to that. They were like affirmations, and yet they felt even more powerful to me than affirmations. They were guide like a mantra, a
yes,
way to keep your mind focused in a space that you wanted to stay focused in. And I felt like she really spoke well into how those can be utilized when you want to shift and alter how you're showing up and how you're connecting and how you're presenting, right? Is I remember this is what I'm here for, right? Her
yes.
her intentional
I I
do you
want to
did you write
read.
them down?
I
Yeah.
did. I wrote down the one. I don't.
Yeah.
I am here. Bear with me while I look at it. I am here to surrender to the flow. I am here to surrender to the flow and stay connected to love.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I like to think about these as when we write down, it's more than an affirmation, right? It's a guiding tenet,
Yeah.
or tenet, right? I don't even know the word. But that commandment, if I think about these are the
Yeah.
rules that, she's living by. I am here to surrender to love. That's big.
I know.
And so, how can we each, I like to think about this as um, I do an exercise with clients that I call what I know to be true about myself,
Mm,
right? And we could take it a step further because what you know to be true about yourself, here, this could be a truth for Ericka that she is here to surrender to love
yeah.
and stay connected, or surrender to the flow and stay connected to love. Like that is her truth
Yeah. Right.
and
Right.
a guiding principle for her.
Yeah. And how your path like will almost direct you towards that kind of statement that you need. I was thinking about her sharing how she used her planning almost as an excuse or whatever to not be present. Right? It was a good reason because she was always trying to be in control and get things done and stay on top of everything. Right? And and it kept her from being really present in the moment. Right? And we talk about a lot about this, on the show, and a lot of people want to be present to their lives. They want to feel the presence that we're talking about. And the only way you do it, right, is to surrender to being in your experience, which often can feel chaotic,
Yes.
and be a presence of a love, right?
Yes.
And and just a presence of whatever you want. Maybe you don't want to be a presence of love. Maybe you want to be a presence of stability that day. Maybe you want to be a presence of joy that day. Whatever it is, but you rally up that quality, right? And then you stand strong in it. You imagine yourself as a tree, literally with leaves of love or joy or whatever it is that
Yes.
you want to be that day,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really does take, it's not just controlling your mind, right?
Yeah.
Being in your body and knowing your nervous system, being able to calm your nervous system because and I think about being in the present, being having the presence of we say presence of mind, but full-bodied presence, to be in the moment. It's so hard for us, many of us, because we're always living in the future or the past, right?
Yeah.
And so when we're in this place of present without the being in the future or past, it's uncomfortable because we're not used to being in that place,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I mean, I do have clients who say, they can't journal or they can't meditate or they can't quiet their mind. Um, but I think it's a practice that you have to train your body, your nervous system to do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's really, I mean, for most of us, I want to come back to for many, many of us out in the world at large today, our fight or flight generally that mechanism, right, that keeps us safe is generally turned on. Think of it like a
Full
different
open.
switch, right? Yeah. So you could be turned on a little or you could be on high alert, right? And it's uncomfortable to take it back down and find, right, what does it feel like to be calm and present and relaxed and in a neutral state when you've been so busy looking around and what do I have to do next and what's coming at me and yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, protection, right? It's
I like to,
hard. Yeah.
yeah, I like to think of our nervous system as having, having like a muscle that has two sides, or maybe when you think about your body, right, your right side and left side, and the nervous system being not that much difference from, maybe if we're right-handed and we write with our right hand, we do most things with our right hand. And
Yeah.
then when we try to, write or brush our teeth with our left hand, it's uncomfortable and it's messy and it's, where our hand isn't, we're not in control of it,
Yeah.
right, as much.
Yes.
And I like to think about our nervous system that way. When we live in one side of our nervous system, the other side is out of shape. It's unpracticed, it's weak. And
Yeah.
so, how can you strengthen the side of your nervous system that you're not using in a balanced way? And, I mean, there are people who are in that side, the rest and digest side of their nervous system. When I think about the difference between high alert and lethargy, right? Depression, right? That side is that low side of being really stuck in that place of low energy and low,
Yeah.
I, I don't, yes, I don't know exactly how to describe
Well,
it, but
I know. Yeah, some of it's the chemicals. You don't have enough chemicals because you don't have the activity in your body to
in your
to
body, right,
generate them, right?
right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so maybe you need to practice being, you know, out of your comfort zone and waking up the other side of your nervous system
Yeah.
in safe, small ways, right?
Right.
Whatever side you're working on, small, safe ways.
Yes, yes, gradual, right? Really
Yes,
like the gradual way is really, I think, the more powerful way. It's like going to the gym. This is the best always. I love this analogy. It's like you don't go to the gym and start lifting 100-pound weights. You start with 10, 20, 30, 40, and you work your way up.
that's right.
Some of us don't get to
Yeah,
100 ever, but that's okay.
right,
And
right.
you do what you can, right? You make yourself as
Yes,
strong as you can, but you do it
yes,
gradually and
yes.
safely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess my like and as we conclude here today, there's so much here for everybody to think about, but I think that the real strong message is in order to really thrive in the world today, you've got to get out of your head and into your whole body and really develop your own practice, whatever that might look like, of knowing what it feels like on a regular basis to be in your full body and find your comfort there. I was talking to a client the other day, and I asked her, where is your inside your body? Where is your spiritual resting place? And I said, well,
What a
I don't think
beautiful
I've ever said
question.
those words out loud, but this is what came in to me, right? And I thought, we all have one. And in fact, that is, when Ericka talked about letting go of control and leaning into the chaos, right? The way that you can do that comfortably is when you have a resting place inside that feels strong and centered and grounded. And you can develop that. We can all develop that, right?
So
And then
where is yours?
I would say mine is in my heart area. Yeah, I think it generally is in my heart space, maybe sometimes a little bit in my second, more down in second chakra, like down in womb space. It
Yeah,
depends on kind of maybe where I am and what's going on. But I'd say, yeah, in general, it's my heart space. And when I know that I'm feeling off, I can really connect quickly and realize, oh, I'm in my head completely, or I'm on high alert. And so I know how to take a few breaths and easily go into that spiritual resting place, right? Where I go, okay, wait a minute, what's really going on here? And let me take inventory, so to speak, outside and inside. Yeah.
that's such a beautiful question. And I think one of the practices I do when I'm feeling too in my head,
Hmm.
or even out of my head, right?
Yeah. Uh,
Um, it is the breath work, and it's several breaths that I bring deeper and deeper. So it might be a breath into my heart space, and then a breath into my belly, and then a breath into my hips,
yeah.
and then my knees, and
Mhm.
then my ankles,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
It's
so
great.
that grounding, that coming back into my body really does bring me some presence and embodied self-awareness and safety. So I
Right.
never thought about it as a place of spiritual safety in my body. But
Yeah.
I'm telling you, by the time I get to my calves, that breath is going right through, and I can feel the opening of spaciousness in my body.
Yeah.
It really does, you know, it does calm my mind.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like even if we're in a space where, I know with, all that went on with my daughter and her community in North Carolina losing everything. And, there's just all the trauma and drama that was going on there. I was so off in so many ways, knowing what she was going through. But even though I couldn't like get myself into the state I normally could get into and a really more like really truly rest repose, I could at least get back inside and calm myself and remember to think the thoughts I wanted to think and stay grounded and stay in what do I want to do in this moment? If I need to support her, I want to support her. I wanted to take action that's going to feel good. What is it that I need to do right now? Right. And so it gives us again that sense of how can I come back into a flow, right? That feels less driven by my nervous system or chaos or fear, right? Yeah. Yeah.
And that is such an important reminder because many of our listeners, many of my clients, um, are highly sensitive people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you think about, being a highly sensitive in the world we live in, again, the 24-hour news cycle, we are experiencing um, pain, trauma, suffering worldwide at a global level,
Right.
right? And as if it's in our community,
Yeah.
and our bodies aren't really
No.
designed for that.
No.
Um, and even taking that high sensitive nature into the workplace when, you know, you might absorb the tension, the conflict, the stress of others around you.
Right.
It's really important to know while you can't control what is happening in the world or in your workplace, that you have some sense of control over how you can help your body process it.
Right. And then how you can respond. Because I
That's
think
right.
they go together. If you
Yes.
can get yourself into a place in your body where you feel like, okay, here I am. I'm in my body. I'm being myself. What do I really want to do here? How do I really want to respond? Right. Versus that reactive knee-jerk reaction that oftentimes doesn't feel good, you know?
No,
Yeah.
no, no.
Well,
Such a good
Laurel,
conversation.
heartfelt living in a heady world. I mean, just remembering that we're out there in a heady world and that we're, doing the big work in our generation right now and the generations to come of, more heartfelt living, that this is part of our assignment as the human race right now is how do we return to a more full-bodied state so that we can access all our faculties?
Yes.
That's your invitation for everybody out there this week. What commitment can you make to get more connected to all your faculties throughout your whole body? Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Good challenge for the week.
Use all of your
Use it
intelligences.
all. Use it
Right.
all. Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Hey,
What
thank
a-
you, Laurel. Yeah. Thank you for a great month of yeah, really, really good stuff this month. Loved it.
every, every month so far this season has been a really good month. I'm really enjoying the conversations and the topics and our guest.
Yeah, and I'm
Yeah.
enjoying your messages. I feel like the one-to-one message of just you speaking into us as listeners, right? And just thinking about the topics that we're sharing and sharing some really good ideas about how to reflect on that has been really powerful. I hope everybody's enjoying it out there. We want to know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
I will receive that.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad. All right. I'll see you again next month for a great conversation.
Yes. And
Yeah.
listeners, thank you as always for being with us. We'll be
Thank
back
you.
with more next week.
I sure will. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye for now.